My son scoffed at my old car and said, "Dad, stop pretending you still matter. Nobody cares about your junk," while his friends took pictures and laughed. But when the collector arrived to buy it for a fortune, their jaws dropped. His laughter died. I want you to tell me where you're reading this from before I begin. Your city, your street, your corner of the world. Because I'm curious if disrespect echoes the same way where you live as it did on my driveway that cold Saturday afternoon. The sky was the color of old steel, the kind that keeps its secrets, and the wind bit like it had teeth. I pulled up slow, my hands easy on the wheel out of habit, not because the car needed gentleness. She always responded to it, like a well-trained heartbeat, but because I loved the feeling of the steering taking the turn with me. The engine settled into a soft purr, the kind only an old soul knows how to make. I should have been left alone with that sound, just me and the machine that carried more of my past than any photo album. Instead, I saw him, my son, Ethan, standing at the top of the steps with 3 of his friends in jackets too thin for the weather and smiles too wide for kindness, phones out, arms crossed. One of them was already whispering something that made the others laugh. I parked. The hood ticked as the heat breathed out of it. The wind shoved a wrapper along the curb, and it got caught against the front tire, tapping like a finger trying to get in. I got out slowly, closing the door with the care that has muscle memory, hand to frame, breath held for the soft click. That's when he said it. "Dad, stop pretending you still matter. Nobody cares about your junk." He didn't even look at me when he said it. His eyes were on the car, on the curve of the fender, and the faded paint that had mellowed from red to something like wine left open overnight. He was talking to his audience. He wanted them to hear the line. He wanted them to laugh on cue. They did. The sharp kind of laugh teenagers do when they've found someone else to be a little cruel to, so they don't have to wonder who will be cruel to them. One of the boys lifted his phone and took a picture, angling it to catch the cracked driveway, the chipped mailbox, the dull badge on the grill. Another one said, "Post it, man." Yeah, it was a Boomer Barn find, and they all cackled like crows. My son's mouth did a shape I know too well now, something between a smirk and a shield. He thinks the face protects him. He thinks it makes him taller. I looked at him. I didn't raise my voice because I don't need to. That's not how I was built. My father used to say, "A steady voice can hold a storm." That's what I gave my son. Steadiness. "Afternoon," I said. Just that. Polite in a way that is really a mirror held up to someone. He made a little sound, a scoff pushed through his nose. The boy with the beanie leaned his back against the passenger door like he belonged there, and I felt something inside me shift a degree colder. Not anger, not fire, a click, like a safe's tumbler moving into place. "Why are you still driving this thing?" he asked, not looking at me still, just at the boys. "Like, you coming here to embarrass me?" He made the place his, my house, my cracked steps, my front door that still sticks in summer, by the way he spread his arms, palms open like a host gesturing to a party. His friends nodded along in that dumb chorus boys do when they're trying on a leader's jacket. "You should Uber," one of them said. The other added, "He can't, man. He's trying to cosplay the 70s. More laughter. The wind carried it off the roof and down the street, but it left the sting behind. I took a breath that came in cold and left warmer. The car's engine made one more settling sound, a soft hiccup, then went quiet, as if it knew it was being watched. My hands stayed at my sides. I watched the boy in the beanie slide a little, his belt scraping the door chrome. "Step away from the door," I said, and maybe 4 words never carried more weight in my mouth. The boy blinked, startled to be addressed like a person adrift, and suddenly thrown a rope. He stepped away. Ethan rolled his eyes. "Chill, Dad," he muttered, and it wasn't the word. It was the tone. Careless, like I was a TV turned to the wrong channel. If you're reading this in a quiet kitchen, with a mug cooling by your hand, maybe you think now is when I should have shouted. Maybe you're picturing a slam of the palm on the hood, or a speech about respect and house rules and the cost of things. I want you to know this. I've learned that shouting is what you do when you've already lost something. I haven't lost myself. Not yet. So, I didn't shout. I walked to the front of the car and ran my fingers along the edge of the hood, where the paint thins to a soft matte, feeling the little imperfections like braille from the years. A pebble had jumped up and bit the clear coat last spring. I remembered that day. the way the sun threw silver off the lake as I drove with the windows down. A good day. Worth a nickel. Take your pictures, I said quietly. Get the angle you want. That made them slow, uncertain, because they were prepared for a fight, not permission. Boys who want to draw blood don't know what to do when you hold out your wrists. Ethan frowned. What's your deal? He asked. He meant, why aren't you playing the part I wrote for you? He meant, don't make this harder for me by refusing to be small. I could see the reflection of the house in the windshield, warped by the years of glass. My wife planted those flower beds along the front walk. She liked blue, hydrangeas that pushed up against the downspouts and made the siding look whiter. The beds are brown now, the way you leave things when the person who cared about them isn't there to tuck them in for winter. A boy in a yellow hoodie stepped closer, peering in at the interior. Man, there's like no screen in there, he snorted. No Bluetooth. I smiled a little at that, but only on the inside. The dashboard is a clean sweep of metal and glass and dials that tell you actual things. Oil pressure, temperature, life. No apologies, no pretenses. Dad, Ethan said, and now he used the word like a dull tool. Seriously, you showing up in this fossil? You're making me look bad. He said it straight at me now, because the friends had done their job, and he wanted the pleasure of landing the punch himself. He doesn't remember who buckled him into this back seat while it was still new enough to smell like glue and leather. He doesn't remember throwing up apricot baby food on that same seat and the way his mother laughed. He doesn't remember all the little lives we've lived inside this metal skin. He was too small to know then, and now he's too proud to ask. The boy in the beanie lifted his phone again. Say cheese, he laughed, and I looked up and let the camera catch me the way I wanted it to. Upright, unbothered, hands loose, eyes flat. It's an art, that look. It tells the world you understand the joke and you're not in it. Take your pictures, I repeated softly. It'll look different to you in about an hour. One of them snorted. Yeah, after we tow it. The wind shifted. You could smell someone's laundry detergent and the faint metallic taste of snow thinking about arriving. I thought of the first time I drove this car down the highway at night, with your road opening like a ribbon. The headlights made a clean cone through the dark, and the dash lights glowed the color of old whiskey. I thought of my wife's laughter when I took an exit she wasn't expecting, just to give her the thrill of the unknown on a Thursday. The way her hand found my thigh and stayed there, casual and sure, like she believed in me more than I did. I let those thoughts be warm in my chest for a moment, then I put them away because the present demanded my face. Ethan had stepped down off the top step now, performing for a closer crowd. Listen, man, he said, like I was a bro instead of a bridge he'd crossed and forgotten. You gotta stop this nostalgia thing. It's sad. He tilted his head, trying on empathy the way you try on a hat you don't intend to buy. Like, sell it. Get something normal, you know? A real car. Nothing had ever sounded less real to me than what he called real. I studied him the way you take a measurement you intend to keep hidden. The new shoes I knew he couldn't afford without asking me. The jacket with a brand name across the chest that shouted louder than his voice. The way his hair had been pushed into carelessness with care. He thought he was building a self out of things that could be bought. It's an easy mistake. It's a costly one. I'll tell you what's sad. One of his friends murmured, too quietly for anyone but me to hear. He looked at me, and his eyes were kinder than the others. He was the kind of boy who laughs because he's afraid to do anything else. You guys done? I asked him, and I put just enough iron under the words to make them stand straight. He nodded and stepped back. My son lifted his chin. You're not bringing that thing inside the garage, he declared. He said garage, like he invented it last spring. I kept my eyes on his and let silence do the work of a paragraph. People fill silence when they're nervous. They pick up words like stones and throw them to see what rebounds. He added, it leaks oil. Mom hated the smell. That last word came out harsher than he meant. It always does now when he says mom, like it cuts his mouth on the way out. I walked to the porch, up the steps, and stood one level above him so I could see the light in his eyes. He's tall. He took that from me, but height isn't power. He shuffled, just a fraction, because I wasn't doing the thing he expected. And uncertainty is a draft he can't stand. The door stuck the way it always does, and I nudged it with my shoulder. The trick I taught myself so I wouldn't have to fix it yet, not alone. I stood in the doorway and turned back, the house's warm exhale coming around my shoulders. "You done?" I asked him. He made a face, that shield again. "Whatever," he said. "Just don't embarrass me. People are coming later." He meant his people. He meant a small kingdom of teenagers with thin jackets and loud laughs, a little court where mockery is a crown. "You already took care of that," I said, and I let the words lie between us like a piece of cold metal. He sucked a breath in to say something back, but I closed the door softly and let the latch whisper its click. I didn't slam it. He doesn't get that drama from me. Inside, the house smelled like clean wood and the faint ghost of rosemary from a roast I made 2 nights ago. Too big for one man, but I still make recipes for 2 without thinking. I hung my keys on the hook where they've lived for 23 years. The car key sat there shining its quiet shine, a little worn at the teeth. I ran my thumb along the edge of the fob and then set my hand flat on the hall table. On it sits a bowl my wife bought because it looked like the ocean in summer, blue inside with little white flecks like foam. It holds the small things that add up to a life: rubber bands, stamps, a church key no one uses now. I stood there long enough to hear my heartbeat slow down and the laughter outside melt into chatter. A voice, his, rose once, loud and brittle, then sank. Boys who think they're men always try for a last word. I made coffee, not because I needed it, because the ritual matters. Measure, pour, wait. The kettle sang a little and then fell quiet. The steam fogged the small window over the sink, and when I wiped a circle with the side of my hand, I saw the car's roof through the glass, a neat line under the gray sky. When I lifted the mug, the curl of steam smelled like the mornings we used to wake up before him and sit shoulder to shoulder at this very counter. My wife's toes on my foot under the stool crossbar, her laugh small and private the way a secret should be. If you're reading this tucked in a bus seat or at your desk, you might be wondering why I'm telling you about coffee when the boys outside are hungry for a show. I'm telling you because this is how you hold the part of yourself no one can take. You honor small things. You get steady. You prepare. The doorbell rang, not from the front, from the side door by the old garage that sticks worse than the front in August. I didn't rush. I set the mug down on the counter and walked through the living room, where the couch has a dip on one side and a folded blanket that still smells a little like lavender when the sun hits it. I passed the photos on the wall, our son gumming a wooden spoon in a high chair, his hair tufty and wild, him in a little red jacket with his mother behind him, hands on his shoulders, her smile the shape that made everything feel earned. I didn't linger there. You don't need to hurt yourself on purpose. At the side door, I paused long enough to listen to the wind again. The bell rang a second time, polite, not urgent. I set my hand on the knob and felt the cold climb my fingers. Then I opened it and the air slipped in. I saw a shadow on the porch concrete, a neat silhouette, and for a moment, the past and present sat beside each other like 2 men on a bench, not speaking yet. I almost smiled, not big enough for anyone outside to see, just enough to know I still could. He stood there on the small concrete square like he belonged to the weather. Coat neat, scarf tucked, shoes without a speck on them, despite the grit our wind kicks up. He had the kind of posture that says he has never rushed for anything, and still always arrived on time. He lifted his hat a little, not enough to be old-fashioned, just enough to show he understood courtesy. "Mr. Collins," he said, and it felt good to be called by my name like that, not Dad used like a dull tool. "I came for the car." His voice had a quiet under it, the sort of quiet money makes when it doesn't need to introduce itself. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Voss," I said, and the name fit him. He had a leather folio under one arm and gloves in his other hand, not on, carried like he didn't want to leave fingerprints on the day. A bit of cold came in around him. I stepped aside, and we moved down the hall where the house holds the last of summer in its wood. Outside, the laughter had thinned to chatter, then to nothing, as if the wind itself was waiting. We rounded the corner of the house, and the driveway opened like a stage. The boys were there with their phones lowered in their hands now, confused about what scene they were in. Ethan half turned toward us and froze the way a deer does when it's used to streetlights, but not what steps out from a car it can't judge. Mr. Voss didn't blink at any of them. His eyes went straight to the car, the way a man looks at a face he's been expecting. He took 3 steps forward and stopped. He didn't touch it. He just looked. Original paint? He asked, soft. As honest as the sun, I said. No respray, no tricks. She tells the truth if you know the language. He smiled, the quick kind a man saves for when something he's been told turns out to be exactly right. He circled the nose and bent a little to see the way the light slid off the fender curve. He breathed out, and his breath made a small cloud before it left. The patina is good, he murmured. Not neglect. Time. There's a difference. He looked at me to check if I understood. I did. I've learned to love the difference between worn and ruined. It's the difference between men who've worked and men who've not been touched by the world at all. Ethan found his voice. Hey, he said, shoulders angling wide like a door he didn't actually know how to hold open. Can we help you? He made help sound like leave. The newsboy cap drifted a little higher on one friend's head as the boy tried to see what was happening without looking like he cared. The boy in the yellow hoodie swiped his phone to a fresh camera screen, but kept it low. Mr. Voss turned toward my son with a calm that comes from being answered too many times by arrogance dressed as youth. I have an appointment with Mr. Collins, he said. He didn't add one unnecessary word. He looked back at the car, moved to the rear, and crouched. His fingers hovered near the bumper, like a man warming his hands at a fire he knows could burn. What is this? Ethan asked, looking at me now, trying to catch up. Who is he? He's someone who recognizes value, I said. I kept my voice flat, no heat, no pride, just the kind of gravity that makes other people check their footing. Mr. Voss laughed once, a soft breath of a sound at the tailpipe. Dual exhaust, he said. Factory tips, no aftermarket leaflets. The lines are true. He stood and glanced toward the interior. May I? After you, I answered. The keys were on the inside hook. I know exactly where everything is in my house. I reached into my pocket and came out with the spare I keep for days like this, the metal warm from being near me. When I opened the driver's door, the hinge made that low creak the car has always made. Not a complaint, a note, hers. Mr. Voss leaned in, breathed the air, and closed his eyes for a small, unguarded second, like a pianist hearing his instrument breathe back. Original steering wheel, he said. No cracks, the gauges are clean, seat stitching. He looked at me. You had this repaired, but not replaced. Top stitching only, I said. She earned every crease. I wasn't going to cover her history to make a picture. Who even talks like that? The beanie muttered, but his voice had lost the sharp edge. The sharp edge had backed up, wary of cutting something too strong. Ethan tried again, more in control this time, because he understood he needed to perform leadership. Dad, if this is about you trying to sell that thing, like on the lawn, in front of the house, this is exactly where it belongs, I said without looking at him. Out in the cold, where breath shows. She's always run better in winter air. Keeps men honest. Mr. Voss came back around to the front with that deliberate pace. Numbers? He asked, and I knew what he meant. I lifted the hood, and the latch came free the way your own hand leaves a glove. We leaned in together. It's a holy feeling. Two men over an engine bay when the engine is more than metal. He nodded at the stamping on the block and then at the tag on the firewall. Matching, he said quietly, and I could hear a little excitement under his calm now. Money's heartbeat under a doctor's bedside voice. Carburetor is correct. Intake manifold, correct. Radiator, core looks original. No cheap replacements. The bolt heads aren't eaten. You kept it out of salt. I kept it out of everything ugly, I said, and that was true in more ways than one. For 10 winters, I drove it on Sundays only, out where the road is 2 lanes and the fences are honest, then put it back under a cover, so soft my wife called it a blanket. She used to run her hand across that gray cover like you pet a sleeping animal you love. Is it even safe? The boy in the yellow hoodie asked, genuinely curious now. Like, there's no airbags. It has a different kind of safety, I said, closing the hood with a hand on the center, not at the corner, never at the corner, because that's how you make a wrinkle that turns into a scar. It makes you pay attention? Mr. Voss stepped back and opened his folio. Papers, neat and white, the corners square. He took out a sheet with a header from an auction house and another with values that flowed up and down like a tide. He glanced at them, but only like a man glancing at a map for a road he already knows. You said you have provenance, he said. I nodded and went to the passenger side to pop the glove box. The latch worked like it always has, firm, then a little give, then that smooth drop. Inside, A folder I've kept for years, full of the small proofs that make a story hold. Purchase papers yellowed at the edges, service books with stamps like small vows, 2 Polaroids that have faded to the kind of color memory keeps. My wife in the passenger seat, hair tucked up in a scarf, smiling at something only I could have said. My son, 3 years old, standing on the seat while I held him steady, his little hands on the steering wheel, eyes too big for his face and his mouth open. In a laugh the world hasn't heard from him in a long while. I handed the folder to Mr. Voss. He didn't grab. He received. He leafed through each piece, and when he got to the Polaroids, he pressed his lips together and nodded. He isn't sentimental. He respects what is real. "Thank you," he said. And he meant for keeping this car a person would want to know. He handed the folder back and closed his folio. He looked at the boys again, like he was only now allowing them into the world. "Gentlemen," he said. They straightened a little because being called gentlemen does something to your spine, no matter your age. Ethan shifted from one foot to the other. The cold was getting into him. "So, what, you buy old cars?" he asked, trying to make his tone casual, like he didn't care if the answer was yes or no. He cared. "I buy stories that move under their own power," Mr. Voss said, not unkind. "Sometimes they look like cars." "It's a piece of junk," Ethan said, but the words didn't have teeth anymore. They came out like a habit he couldn't break. He glanced at me and then away, too quick. "It leaks," he added weakly, reaching for something to regain ground. "Vintage machines mark their place," Mr. Voss said, smiling a little. "It is the new ones that pretend they were never here." I watched my son watch this man and try to place him on his map of status. The folio, the coat, the way he didn't look around for approval. My son had never seen this species up close. He's met men who flash money like a badge. He has not learned yet that the ones with the real weight hold it close and only put it down when it helps them lift something that matters. "What are you offering?" I asked. It was time to move the day forward, keep the scene clean. I didn't want this to become a circus. I wanted it to be a ceremony. Mr. Voss gave a number. He didn't clear his throat before it. He didn't bargain with himself on the way to it. He told the truth as he sees it. The number hung there for a second, like the white of the sky before snow finds its shape. The boy in the yellow hoodie's mouth opened and then closed. The beanie made a sound he tried to swallow. Ethan blinked twice and forgot where his hands were supposed to live. They floated to his pockets and then out again, and then fell to his sides. "That's insane," he said, but quiet, the way you speak in a church even if you don't believe in churches. "For this?" He waved a hand toward the car and then dropped it, as if even the air wouldn't let him finish the gesture. Mr. Voss didn't look at him. He looked at me. "There are 6 in this condition that I know of," he said. 2 are in collections that will not be broken. 1 is in Europe and has an owner who will die with it. 1 is a rumor, that leaves 2. This is the better of them. And it has..." He tapped the folio, where the Polaroid sat inside it now. "A soul." "What did you say?" Ethan asked, as if the word might be new to him when applied to metal. "I said it has a soul," Mr. Voss repeated gently. "That is rarer every year." The wind lifted and set Ethan's hair the way a mother's hand once did. He shook his head, trying to reset his face. "Dad, you never told me it was worth..." He couldn't finish. Pride put a hand over his mouth. It didn't silence him. It only made him sound younger. "You never asked what it was worth," I said evenly. "You told me what you thought it was worth. Those aren't the same conversation." He looked at the ground. The boys looked at him, looking at the ground. I didn't move toward him. I have learned that comfort given too soon is like sugar water. It keeps a creature alive, but it doesn't make it strong. Mr. Voss named the number again, this time with the precise way it would be delivered. "Cashier's check today for the amount we discussed. Wire on Monday for the remainder." He named the remainder, and the air changed temperature. Even the house seemed to listen. "I'll have my transporter at the end of the street at 4. Closed trailer. No one will see it go if you don't want them to." He looked at me the way men do when they mean, "I don't need a show." "That won't be necessary," I said. "She's never been ashamed of being seen. If it's all the same, she'll drive out of here under her own power." The last part I said more for myself than anyone. Machines that have carried you over rivers deserve to leave through the front door. "Dad," Ethan said, and the words sounded different. It wasn't a tool now. It was a question he wasn't sure how to ask. Why didn't you tell me?" He hated himself for asking. He needed to ask. Pride and need made a small storm on his face. "Because you weren't listening," I said. "I let the truth sit like a coin on a counter where anyone can see if it's genuine. You were busy telling me who I was. It's loud work, writing other people's names. It leaves no room for reading." He flinched and then tried to make it look like he'd only shifted against the cold. "It's just a car," he said, one last weak throw. "Then it won't trouble you," I said, and kept my eyes on him so he could feel the distance between what he'd chosen to understand and what he could still learn if he wanted to. He looked away first. He always does when I don't give him anger to push against. Mr. Voss took a pen from his folio that looked like something you'd inherit, not buy. He wrote, and his handwriting was the kind that keeps its back straight. He tore one sheet from the pad, folded it once, handed it to me. "My office," he said, "my banker, my cell. If anything makes you uncomfortable at any point, you call, and I fix it before it finishes leaving your mouth." He is a man who has learned to make problems in 10 seconds before other. Men noticed they started. We went to the porch table. I pulled the chair out with the leg that always sticks and set the folder down. He set his papers next to it. Aligned the corners, not fussy, just respectful. We started on the forms that make two men's agreement legible to the world. Behind us, I could feel the boys in a loose clump, their energy like static that couldn't find a ground. They murmured the way a river does when it's low. Phones disappeared into pockets not because they were told to, but because they felt wrong in their hands. Ethan hovered. He didn't know where to stand. There wasn't a role for him in this scene that let him be tall without first being small. Can I? He started, then stopped. He glanced at the papers. "Do you need me for anything?" "Not at the moment," I said, careful, "but there's always something a man can do if he wants to be useful." I didn't look at him when I said it. I didn't give him a ladder and a promise. He has to find the first rung himself. Mr. Voss looked up at him and then back to me, reading the room the way you read wind by the way it pushes the tops of trees. He softened nothing. He made no speeches about fathers and sons. He ran his finger under one line and said, "Sign there, Mr. Collins." I did. My hand was steady. It has always been steady when it matters. "Bro," the beanie whispered to Ethan, forgetting to be cruel, slipping into the voice boys use when they tell each other the truth by accident. "Your dad he just did a deal like in the movies." He sounded a little awed. He sounded a little lost. Ethan didn't answer. He looked at the car. For the first time in years, he looked at it as if it were not just a lump of my stubbornness. He looked, and I could see him trying to see what he had refused to see before. It hurt him. Growth always does. Mr. Voss snapped his folio shut with a soft sound. "I'll bring the check," he said. "May we start her?" he asked me. Not because he needed permission to touch the machine he was about to buy. Because he understands ceremony. It's a small religion men like us keep. I nodded. "Keys are in my hand," I said, and I felt the weight of them. All the Sundays in a single piece of metal. I held them up a fraction so the light could catch. The boy's eyes followed, like cat's eyes do. A glint. I walked to the car, and the gravel under my shoes made that sound I've known since I was a young man, the sound of leaving and arriving at the same time. I opened the door and slid in. The seat fitted itself to my back the way a good chair remembers you. I let my hands rest on the wheel, and for half a heartbeat, I saw my wife in the passenger seat again, hair tucked back, eyes laughing. "Ready?" I asked the air out of habit. Old habits are faithful. Somewhere, I hope she answered. The key turned, and the starter did its little clearing of the throat. Then the engine caught, low and sure, an animal coming awake with no fear in its bones. The garage windows rattled a little from the bass of it. The idle settled into that heartbeat you only hear when you've learned to listen. Mr. Voss closed his eyes and then opened them, because he is not a man who indulges in long reveries when there is business to honor. He bent near the engine once more, listened, nodded. "Good compression," he said. "No knocks. She was driven, not just stored. That matters." Ethan took 2 steps forward. He didn't mean to. His body moved him. He put his hand on the roof, light, the way you touch a dog that doesn't know you yet. He looked at me through the windshield glass, and for a second there was nothing between us but a pain and the years we both misused. His mouth opened, but he didn't know what to say. That was okay. Words were not the thing we needed at that second. I shut the engine off. let the quiet come back so we could hear what was left in it. Mr. Voss and I finished what the papers demanded. He slid the check across without drama. I slid it into the folder without counting, because if you invite a man like him into your home and then count in front of him, you have invited the wrong kind of man. He gave me his hand, and I gave him mine, palms meeting with hands that have both held tools and pens. "Thank you for keeping her honest," he said. "Not many do." "Thank you for knowing what you were looking at," I said. If we had been alone, we might have said more. Men like us don't need much. We need to know we are not the only ones who notice when a thing keeps its promise for 30 years. The boys had drifted back toward the steps without noticing they'd moved. That's what awe does when it's new to you. It pulls you backwards so you don't drown. Ethan didn't move. He was rooted. He looked at me again, not at the car, and there was a thin sheen in his eyes. He blinked it away before his friends could see. He didn't know I saw anyway, because I've known his face since it was a new moon, and every phase thereafter. He took a breath like a swimmer who has decided to try the deeper end. "Dad," he said carefully, each letter respectful, because he was now speaking to a man, not a prop. Can I ask you something?" He swallowed. "Can I be here when it goes?" The boys turned their heads to him as if a bell had rung. He didn't look their way. He kept his eyes on mine. The wind went quieter for a heartbeat. Or maybe it was only my blood deciding to move slow enough to hear his question. I didn't rush the answer. I let him feel the weight of silence used as a gift, not a punishment. Then I said, "You can be here." I didn't add, "if you can be quiet." He heard that part anyway. He nodded once, grateful in a way that doesn't spill onto the ground. We stood there a little, 3 men and 3 boys, and 1 car that knew more about us than we knew about ourselves. Somewhere down the street, a door shut. A dog barked and then decided it had nothing to contribute. The sky was the color of steel still, but it had softened along the edges, the way a bruise does when it stops trying to make a point. Inside the house, the kettle clicked as it cooled. I thought of the blue bowl by the keys and the stamp with a bird on it, and the way small things hold steady while big things decide who they're going to be. Ethan cleared his throat once, then again. Do you think I could?" He stopped and reset. "What was it like?" he asked suddenly, surprising himself. "When you first drove it, with Mom, what was it like?" The question knocked something loose in me, but it didn't hurt when it fell. It landed in a place that can hold it. "It felt like this," I said, and I let my hand hover above the roofline where his hand had been a minute before. Cold air, breath showing, something old waking up, and someone next to me who knew where we were even when the map ended. I saw him take that in and put it somewhere it wouldn't get broken. Mr. Voss checked his watch and then the street. He hears traffic with his eyes. "I'll bring the transporter up at 4, he said again, gentle. He didn't need to repeat himself. He did it so Ethan would know what time the world would change shape and have a chance to make his own shape first. He tipped his hat minutely, the way a man closes a good chapter without a flourish, and walked back toward the side path, his shoes quiet even on the grit. When the gate clicked behind him, the boys exhaled. The beanie swore softly, reverently. The yellow hoodie said, "Dude!" and didn't add anything because sometimes dude is a complete sentence. Ethan didn't say dude. He said nothing. He was learning how. He was learning a lot all at once and trying not to drop any of it. He looked at the car again, then at me, and then at the car, choosing his future in the tiny angle of his neck. The laughter that had bounced off these steps earlier was gone like a party flyer the rain got to. In its place stood a quieter thing with a backbone. "Do you want coffee?" I asked, like a man offers a hand without bruising pride. He nodded. "Yeah," he said, and his voice cracked a little, but he wrote it out without wincing. "Okay." He turned to his friends. "You guys go inside or go get pizza or something. I'll catch up." He didn't look to see if they approved. Good. They looked at him like he'd taken a step onto a different stair. The beanie clapped his shoulder once, a fast approval boys give when they don't have the words. The yellow hoodie shoved his hands into his pockets and said, "Text me," and then made his mouth shut on the joke that wanted to jump. They went down the walk together, heads close, their laughter not sharp now, just normal. I held the door. Ethan stood a second longer and put his hand on the roof again, deliberate this time. He closed his eyes. He might have been saying something to a god he doesn't admit he believes in. When he opened them, they looked a fraction older. He stepped inside. I followed, the engine's tick fading behind us as the house's warm air took our breath and made it disappear. I hung the keys on the hook, and they made the small metal sound they've made since our son was born. We stood in the kitchen like we've stood 1,000 times, and this time it felt new. I reached for the kettle. He reached for 2 mugs without being told which cupboard. The habit is inside him, even where the pride has been living. That comforts me more than any check can. As the water climbed, he said, "Dad," again, testing the word's new weight. I turned my head. He was studying the photos on the wall with a look that tried not to apologize and ended up being close to respect. He pointed at the one with the red jacket, his mother's hands on his shoulders. "I don't remember that day," he said, not sorry, just sober. "But I wish I did." He swallowed. "I want to remember something right." "You will," I said. "That's how remembering works. It starts the day you decide to do it on purpose." He nodded and let the steam wet his face. The kettle sang a little. I poured and watched the water darken. Simple alchemy. Outside, the car waited, metal and memory, not going anywhere yet. At 4, things would move. Until then, the house held us, and somewhere down the hall, a bowl the color of the ocean kept small anchors where we could find them when the big boat finally left the shore. We stood in the soft kitchen light, letting the steam rise between us until it felt like a small truce. Ethan wrapped both hands around his mug and stared into it the way he used to stare at puddles before he learned to look for his reflection instead of the sky. "I don't know why I said all that," he muttered finally, not quite to me, not quite to himself. "About the car, about you." The words came out square and heavy, without polish, which made them better. I let them sit between us like warm stones. The house hummed its old hum, the fridge's faint rattle, the clock's steady tick, and I remembered how many mornings began with that soundtrack and the scrape of my wife's slippers against the tile. I didn't reach for a speech. Boys who are learning to put down their weapons need a clear table. He glanced at the wall with the photos again, and then back at the window, where the car's roof drew a clean line under the gray. "I was just trying to be funny," he tried, but that sentence flinched as it left him. "No," he corrected, and the correction made me proud in a quiet way. "I was trying to look like I don't care about anything. Because—" He stopped. He swallowed. "Because caring makes you look weak." He said it like he was saying a rule he'd live by, and now he could hear the stupidity in it as it hit the air. "And because I thought you didn't have, anything." He wiggled his fingers around the word. Money, pride, ground to stand on. He meant all of it. I took a slow sip. Coffee tasted like wood smoke, sturdy. "When you were small," I said, "you used to put your hand on that hood and whisper into the paint. Your mother said you were telling it secrets, and the car would keep them for you." He blinked, and I could see the picture land in him, something bright under snow. "You used to say, 'Go fast, Daddy,' and your mother would tap your knee and say, 'Go safe.'" The corner of his mouth lifted, just enough to show the boy who used to race the dog down the hall in his socks. "You didn't laugh at me then," I said. "You laughed with me. There's a difference bigger than a paycheck." He shifted his grip on the mug, the ceramic squeaking against his palm. "I don't know how to get back to that," he admitted. "I don't know how to not perform." He shrugged, small. "Feels like everyone's always pointing their camera, and you gotta be something." He looked up, and there wasn't arrogance there now, just a kid trying to read a map without street names. "How do you not care?" he asked. "You just don't." "I care," I said, and it surprised him enough to make his eyebrows jump. "I care so much it keeps my bones together. I just don't ask the wrong crowd to clap for me." I tapped the counter with one finger. "You want to learn to stop performing? Start doing. You can't swing a wrench and hold a mirror at the same time." He stared at me for a second, then nodded once like he was tucking that away for later. We drank. The steam thinned. The clock hands moved like they always do, whether you're looking or not. At 10 minutes to 3, I set my mug down and said, "Come on." He followed me to the back hall and into the mudroom, where the smell changes from soap to cold metal and rubber. I took the canvas roll off its hook and unrolled the tools on the bench. Spanners like clean bones. Sockets that have clicked onto bolts in the quiet of more Sundays than I can count. He watched what that thin hunger boys get when they want to be useful, but don't know where the door is. If you want to be here when she goes, I said, not looking at him, letting my voice be a flat surface he could step onto if he wanted. You can help me get her ready. That means you listen more than you talk. It means you don't pretend to know what you don't. It means you don't touch a thing unless I tell you to. And when I tell you to, you do it with care and without hurry. He straightened. Yes, he said, then added, sir. And the second word wasn't a performance. It fit the first like its shadow. We stepped back into the cold and the wind bit, but it didn't have teeth anymore. The car sat like a patient animal. I knelt to check tire pressure with a gauge that has outlived. 2 presidents and 1 marriage? No, that's not right. My marriage didn't die. My wife did. The marriage is a boat moored to a dock that still holds. The boat only goes out on anniversaries now, in my head. Hold the light, I told him, and he held it with both hands and the beam steady as a doctor's. Front left 32, I said. Front right? He watched the dial, and for once his mouth didn't run ahead of his eyes. 31, he said. So? I asked. So we bring it up 1, he answered, and I nodded and handed him the pump nozzle. He looked at it like it might test him, then set it to the valve stem and pressed, careful as you'd hold a newborn's head. The tire breathed and rose. He checked again. 32, he said, and couldn't hide the small pride in the perfect alignment. We did the rest with the same slow rhythm, the kind that makes time stop trying to push you. I cracked the oil cap, and the smell was dark and good, the way earth is after rain. See that sheen? I asked, tipping the dipstick so he could catch the light. Gold, not black. That's how you know, not just that something works, but that someone loved it. He didn't make a joke. He nodded, absorbing a language he didn't know I'd been speaking in front of him his whole life. He looked at the driver's seat with a want that made his throat jump. Could I? He started, and then he stopped himself and did it right. May I drive it just like to the end of the street and back? He kept his eyes on the chrome because asking is a vulnerable shape. I let the quiet count to 5 so he could feel the shape and not die from it. Not today, Ethan, I said, flat and gentle. I watched the words land. He almost stiffened, then he smoothed himself down. May I ride with you? He asked, better. Yes, I said. If you can keep still and listen. He nodded so fast it would have made his hair flop when he was 7. We slid in. The interior air was colder than outside. Cars hold winter a little longer. He buckled himself without being told, his fingers fumbling once on the old metal tongue, then finding the click. I turned the key and the engine cleared its throat and settled into its good heartbeat. The dash lights came up, amber tiny suns. The radio, long dead, flickered with an old station number for a second like a ghost, then went dark again. I put my hand on the shifter, and he watched the way my wrist turned, memorizing. Listen, I said. Not to me, to her. I eased us off the brake, and we rolled. Gravel crackled. The tires made their low drum on the cold. We passed his friends on the sidewalk. 2 had come back with paper cups, and the third had a box that smelled like garlic and teenage afternoons. They stopped and watched us pass without lifting their phones, hats off in their own small ways. At the corner, the street opens to the lake road. Pines line it like men with their hands. Behind their backs, and the water throws the light back even when the sky keeps most of it. I fed the throttle, and the engine answered with that long, even tone that makes a man sit up in his life. Ethan's shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched, his eyes unfocused the way a person's eyes do when they're listening with more than ears. We took the curve like a whispered promise. The heater, such as it is, coughed once and then put a little warm at our shins, and that was enough. What did you sell? He asked suddenly, and I knew what he meant without looking. To keep it running, he said, cutting to the part that mattered. What did you sell? I smiled a little at the way he'd learned to reach for the spine of a story. A watch my father left me, I said. Silver. It never kept good time. I told myself a machine that lies about seconds is a bad friend. He turned his face toward me without turning his head, the teenage trick of attention without surrender. And, he asked, and your mother's earrings, I said. He flinched, then looked angry on her behalf. She made me, I added. She put them in my palm and closed my fingers like this. I closed my fists the way she had. She said, metal doesn't cry, a man does. Then he gets up and fixes what he can. We got them back years later when I didn't need to be proud. The car paid us back. Life does that when you let it finish a sentence. We pass the little turnout where a bench sits, iron cold and honest. In summer, people watch the water from there and think big thoughts they forget by dinner. In winter, the bench is a dare. You kept all the papers, he said, softer now. The pictures. He cleared his throat. I don't keep anything. I keep screenshots. He made a face at his own word. They don't smell like anything, he admitted, and that was more wisdom than some men manage before their hair goes white. At 4, I said, a trailer will come and this car will leave under her own power and then rest behind clean walls far from salt. A good ending? I downshifted for the little hill and the engine made its please sound. What you do between now and then is your own story. He swallowed. I want to do one thing, he said, and I waited because I have learned that if you answer too soon, you can scare off a good thing like a loud noise scares birds. I want to apologize, he said, each syllable heavy and honest. Not with a speech, with my hands. He flexed them on his knees. Can we wash it properly, the way you would, before she goes? He looked straight ahead as he asked, ashamed and proud at the same time. We can, I said. We'll do it right. 2 buckets, no swirls. You'll learn how to fold a towel so it doesn't scratch what you love. He made a small sound that might have been a laugh trying not to spook the moment. We looped the block once, twice. On the second pass, Mrs. Alvarez, from 3 houses down, lifted her mitten and gave us a salute from the driveway where she stands every afternoon to see the day end and make sure the mailman looks her in the eye. She's the kind of neighbor who knows when to bring soup and when to leave it by the door without knocking. On the third, 2 boys on bikes braked and stared like they'd seen a tiger. Their father, the quiet one who runs the hardware store, raised his chin at me with the slight upward nod the men use to tell each other they understand investments that look like hobbies and feel like faith. I nodded back and felt something inside me smooth out like a bedsheet pulled tight. We slid back into the drive, and the engine ticked as it cooled again. Ethan got out and didn't slam the door. He looked at me across the roof and said, "Thank you," like it cost him, and he was glad to pay. "Get the hose," I said, and he did. In winter, you don't soak a car. You study it. We filled 2 buckets, 1 soapy, 1 clear, and I showed him how to drag the sheepskin mitt in straight lines, not circles, how to rinse without wasting, how to chase water with a towel that doesn't lint. He didn't rush. He learned the weight of water and cloth and the way to use his wrist so he wasn't pushing dirt back into paint. He didn't talk, and in the quiet I could hear a new kind of respect settling into the gaps between us. As he worked, he glanced at me and then at the house, then away. "I told my friends you were embarrassing," he said, very low, like if he made the sound too big it would crack. "I said you were stuck." He dipped the towel, wrung it, laid it flat, and drew it down the fender the way I'd shown him. "I said the car smelled like old man." His face twisted. "I was trying to be funny," he said, despising the way the word tasted. "I know," I said. "You were trying not to be the one hurt when you thought the world was going to laugh at you." He nodded hard, as if maybe his neck could take the blame from his mouth. He reached the trunk and paused, his hand above the emblem like a blessing. "What are you going to do with the money?" he asked, tone careful, not greedy, curious like a man watching a compass. I wiped the last of the water from the hood and watched the paint come up with that soft glow honest things have. "I'm going to do 3 small, stubborn things," I said. "I'm going to pay off the last of what I owe to no one but sleep. I'm going to endow a scholarship at the vocational school in your mother's name for a kid who learns better with his hands than with a test. And I'm going to fix the porch step that has made the last 5 winters harder than they need to be." He looked at the step like it was the first time he'd seen it. "That's it?" he asked, surprised and not disappointed. "That's it," I said. "I don't want a bigger car. I want quieter nights." He went very still for a long second. "And me?" he asked, and there was a tremor there. Not about money, though money lives under that question for boys raised on the internet, but about place. "Where do I fit?" He stared at the towel in his hands like it might tell the truth if he twisted it right. "That's up to you," I said. "If you want to fit like a patch over a hole, you can. And you'll hold for a while, and then peel when the weather changes. If you want to fit like a joint, cut right, sanded true, you can, and you'll carry weight. but I won't jam you in. I won't pretend you're square when you're not, or soft where you should be strong." He breathed out through his nose, shaky, but he didn't cry. He's learning to put tears where they count. We were drying the last seam under the door when there was a soft rap on the fence. I looked up. It was his friend in the beanie, hat in his hand now, hair messy from being alive. "Mr. Collins," he called, apology already in his posture. Sorry to bother, but my dad wanted me to say he saw the car and, he says it's beautiful. He says he had a model of it when he was a kid." He swallowed. "And I wanted to say sorry for laughing." He looked at Ethan without quite looking and added quieter, "I was just being loud." The wind took the last word and made it smaller. I nodded once, acceptance without ceremony. "Bring your dad by tomorrow," I said. "I've got the old brochure. He might like to see it." The boy's face lit with a gratitude brighter than the sky had managed all day. "Yes, sir," he said. "Thank you." He glanced at Ethan. "You coming?" he asked, meaning to pizza, to 100 dumb small things, to a world that's easier when two boys decide to forgive each other by not mentioning why they needed to. "Later," Ethan said, gentle. The boy nodded like he understood, then trotted off, the beanie back on his head like a flag lowered after a ceremony. The sun considered showing up and then changed its mind. The clouds thinned enough for the car to hold a little light along the roofline. Ethan stepped back and looked. He didn't take a photo. He didn't need to. He put the towel on the fence rail, exact and square. "She looks proud," he said, and the pronoun was right. "She is," I said, "and now she's ready." He looked at the porch step and then at me, something like resolve growing where pride used to take up space. "I'll fix that," he said. "The step. I'll learn how." He looked at my hands. "Teach me." I nodded once. "I will," I said. The kitchen clock ticked toward 4, each second a neat knock on the door of what comes next. In the quiet space before you can hear a big truck long enough to name it, I went to the trunk and opened it. The hinge moved like a thought you've had 100 times. Inside, the things that have lived with the car for years. The toolkit, the blanket that is softer than its age suggests, the spare that has never let me down, the little tin that holds fuses and a pencil stub and a note from my wife. "Call if you're late, I'll worry." I don't call anymore. I handle it a different way. I say her name when I'm alone, and then I answer for both of us. I took out the metal cash box that sits in the corner, unlocked, unnecessary in a world of banks, but meaningful to me. It holds papers no one but a collector and a man who meant his past would ever care about. On top, an envelope with Ethan's name in her handwriting. I'd tucked it there years ago because the trunk is where I keep the things that made us move. I felt him at my shoulder before he spoke. "What's that?" he asked, voice low. He didn't reach. He's learning. I looked at the ink, at the way her loops always made the E into a shape that looks like a wave. "Your mother's letter," I said. He inhaled like the wind had turned to warmth for a second. "She wrote it after your 5th birthday," I went on. "She said I should give it to you when you were ready to hear it." He stood very still, as if moving would make the paper move, as if stillness could keep a thing from being too big. "Am I ready?" he asked, and one corner of his mouth tried to be brave and only managed to be true. I weighed the envelope. I weighed him. "You're getting there," I said, "which is closer than you were at noon." I closed the trunk gently and set the envelope on top of the cash box, so it was the first thing anyone would see if they went looking for something quick. "After," I said. "We'll read it after." He nodded, and the gratitude in it was as clean as the paint we'd just dried. Then he looked down the street, head cocked. He heard it first. A low diesel note that doesn't brag, only announces. He lifted his chin like a deer scenting rain. "Is that?" he began, and I saw the same sound arrive at the top of the pines and slide down the trunks to the asphalt. The transporter would round the corner in a minute. The day was measuring itself into thinner and thinner slices and handing them to us to eat or throw away. I shut the trunk with my hand on its center. The click matched the kitchen clock. The wind lay down like a dog that knows the house rules. Ethan took a breath and squared his shoulders without making them big. He wasn't ready for every answer, not yet. But he was ready to stand next to a thing he had once called junk and understand it had been teaching him a language he finally wanted to learn. The sound came first, a low diesel murmur rounding the bend like a promise kept, and then the white nose of the transporter slid into view, lights steady, paint clean enough to turn the gray afternoon into a mirror. It stopped in front of the house with a hiss of air brakes that sounded like a sigh from a giant, and the driver stepped down, a woman in a navy jacket with her hair in a tight braid and hands that looked like they knew how to lift and how to let go. She glanced at the car, then at me, then at the boy beside me who had washed the rear quarter panel twice without being told. "You Collins?" she asked, voice crisp without being sharp. I nodded. She pointed at the ramp controls. "We can winch her," she said, or she tilted her head, reading the way I stood, or she can walk on like a queen. I felt the smile on my face happen by itself. "She'll go up under her own power," I said, flat and sure, and the driver grinned like we were members of the same small club. "Thought you'd say that." Neighbors appeared the way they do when something honest is happening. Mrs. Alvarez with her mittens, the hardware store owner with a rag still tucked in his back pocket, two kids on bikes straddling their top tubes like colts. Ethan's friends drifted back as if tied to a string they didn't know I held, phones out but lower than before, as if they were embarrassed to make the moment into content. The wind folded itself and sat down. Even the pine branches seemed to lift their chins to watch. Mr. Voss arrived from the side path as quietly as he'd come earlier, folio under his arm, his hat set at an angle a man has to earn. He nodded to the driver, who nodded back, then put a hand on my shoulder, the way one officer congratulates another at the end of a clean operation. "Everything in order," he said. "The wire is scheduled, the check is on your hall table. No surprises." I looked at him, at the way his eyes never flinched, and I knew again why I'd chosen him out of the names that crowd a man's inbox when he has something precious. "One more thing," he added, softer now, pitch for me alone. "If you ever want to see her in climate control, polished and asleep, you call. If you ever want to see her wake up and run, you call sooner." He meant it. He did not say it to be generous. He said it because he understands that love likes an open door. Ethan stood very straight next to me. He didn't tuck his hands into his pockets, didn't bounce on his heels, didn't throw a look to take a temperature that was none of his business. He watched the ramp fold down and the driver lay the tire guides into place. "You'll keep her centered," the driver said, glancing at me with the kind of respect mechanics give each other while pretending it's just instructions. I nodded. "He'll spot," I added, tipping my head at Ethan. The driver's eyes flicked to him, measuring the boy who'd mocked and washed in the same afternoon, and then she gave him one short nod. "You call it," she told him. It startled him. Then he squared his shoulders and moved to where I could see him in the mirror. I slid into the seat one last time, felt the cold leather fit itself to my back, the way a loyal dog settles at your feet. The key turned, the engine woke, and the idol looked down on doubt and did not see itself. There. For a heartbeat, I saw my wife's reflection in the windshield, faint and smiling, wearing the scarf she liked for days like this, and I let the vision pass through me like light through good glass. I put the car in gear, the driver raised her hand, Ethan raised his. "Straight," he called, voice clear. "Good, good, little left, hold, perfect, perfect." He said it like a promise he intended to keep. The nose touched the ramp and the wood made a sound like a stage learning its lines. The rear tires climbed, the whole car angled up as if pointing to where the sun should have been. I feathered the throttle and she answered like a dancer who knows her partner's footwork by heart. The driver watched the front clearance with the kind of attention that wins wars. Ethan's hands moved in small signals that made his friends shut their mouths and watch. "Half a foot," he said, steady. 3 inches, and stop. I stopped. The driver slid the chocks into place and waved. "Cut it," she said. I did. The engine settled. The tick-tick-tick of cooling metal sounded like an old clock getting its reward. If you're reading this on your phone under a blanket or on a break between two kinds of work, I want you to know that the air changed then. A hush isn't the same as silence. A hush is a community deciding to hold its breath together. The kids on bikes put both feet down. Mrs. Alvarez's mitten went to her mouth. The beanie boy exhaled a word that didn't need cussing to carry its meaning. "Whoa." The hardware store owner said nothing, but I saw his knuckles relax on the rag until it hung soft. Ethan was still, eyes bright in a way that made him look 5 and 17, and almost a man, all at once. Mr. Voss stepped up onto the ramp with a practiced grace and placed his hand lightly on the fender, not to claim, to thank. "You did right by her," he told me. "You did right by yourself." He took the keys from my palm with a small bow that felt less like a transaction and more like the end of a dance when partners who respect each other step back so the music can end clean. The driver sealed the straps, checked them twice, and then a third time, because care is not a performance, it is a habit. Ethan swallowed. "Wait," he said, and his voice didn't crack, but it trembled with something better. He stepped up onto the ramp and put his hand next to Mr. Voss's on the fender, fingers spread like a benediction. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the paint. "I'm sorry I called you junk." He didn't look around to see who heard. He was beyond needing witnesses. He was making a record, not content. "And I'm sorry, Dad," he added, eyes on the metal that had carried the three of us farther than any map. "I told everyone you didn't matter. I was wrong." The last word came out like a nail laid into wood, with one sure stroke. I didn't touch his shoulder. I didn't make a speech. I let those two sentences set and cure like concrete. The boys behind him were very quiet. You could hear the thin whine of a distant saw from somewhere down the block where someone was building a fence to keep a dog honest. Mr. Voss, to his credit, made no show of emotion. He nodded once, like a man seeing a clean weld, and stepped down. The driver gave Ethan a look I have seen mechanics give apprentices at the end of a long day, the look that says, "It hurts to learn. Keep going." We closed the trailer, and the doors swallowed the shine and turned it into a memory. The low diesel note started again. The driver raised 2 fingers to her temple in a salute that felt like respect rather than farewell. The transporter pulled away, slow, taking with it an animal made of steel and time. At the corner, the turn signals blinked. Left, gone, and my driveway looked bigger and empty in the way a bed looks empty after a good sleep, not after a nightmare. No one spoke first. Then the beanie boy shuffled, cap in his hands again. "Mr. Collins," he said. "Sir, I—" He stopped. He was a kid, and the words were too heavy to carry all at once. "It was cool," he managed. "The way you didn't, like, you know." He flapped his hands helplessly at the air where shouting would have been. I saved him. "I know," I said. "Thank you." The hardware store owner came up, stuck out his hand, and shook mine the way men do when they've seen something worth shaking hands over. "Nice work," he said, and I knew he meant the car and the boy, and the way we'd all stood. Mrs. Alvarez patted my arm with her mitten and said a prayer that had more warmth than theology. The kids on bikes pedaled away slowly, looking back twice as if the car might roll itself down the ramp and chase them for fun. Ethan's friends hovered. The yellow hoodie took a breath. "Hey man," he said to Ethan, awkward, brave. "We were jerks." He glanced at me. "Sorry, sir." He kicked at a pebble, then squared up. "Your car is the realest thing I've seen all week." He didn't add a hashtag. He didn't need to. Ethan nodded and then held out his fist, and the boy bumped it, and the beanie bumped it, and the third boy did, and there it was. A tiny truce sealed with knuckles and a small smile. "Pizza later," Ethan said. They grinned. "Yeah," the beanie said. "Later." They peeled off, less noisy than they had arrived, leaving behind the shape of boys who might grow into men if they keep their ears open. Inside, the house accepted us without remark. The hall table was the same. The blue bowl was the same. The check with its proper bones lay exactly where Mr. Voss had left it, and I did not lift it to the light, did not stroke it like a pet. Money is a tool. It is not a song. I slid it into the folder next to the papers that had made this day possible and set the folder in the top drawer where the rubber bands live. Ethan stood beside me, eyes on the envelope I had taken from the trunk and placed on the table. His name in his mother's hand glowed like a lighthouse does when you've been at sea long enough to stop pretending you enjoy the waves. "Now?" he asked, voice low, steady. I picked up the envelope and felt the weight of paper that had crossed years without yellowing, because love doesn't oxidize. I handed it to him. "Now?" I said. He didn't rip it. He slid a finger carefully under the flap and freed the letter the way you might coax a bird out of a chimney. He unfolded the page, and the smell of old paper and a hint of her perfume rose up. a ghost that didn't want to scare us. He read. His lips moved, but he didn't make sound. I watched his face the way a farmer watches a field after rain, looking for the first green thread. He cleared his throat and then tried again. "Hi, small love," he read, voice breaking once and then finding its level. "If your father is handing you this, it means you are ready to listen with your whole head and your whole heart. It means you are big enough to be gentle and brave enough to be kind. Here is what I want to tell you. Your father is a good man. He keeps promises to things that cannot speak back. That is how you tell. He will not be loud about his love. You will know it by the way your shoes never have holes when winter starts and the way the oil in the car is never dirty. If you ever forget what matters, put your hand on a thing that has lasted and ask yourself what you're doing to deserve it. If you ever feel ashamed, tell the truth. Then help. Finally." He stopped. He swallowed. He laughed once, a wet, surprised sound. "Finally," he finished, "if you laugh at your father, make sure it's because he told you a good joke, and not because you want strangers to clap. Strangers don't come home with you. We do. I love you bigger than the road." "Mom." He stood very still. Then he pressed the paper flat on the table and set both hands on either side of it like it might otherwise float away. He didn't cry. He did something braver. He let the words change him where he stood. He looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said again, but not as a plea, as an act. "I'm going to fix the porch step. I'm going to ask Mr. Alvarez at the shop if he'll let me sweep and then teach me one thing a week. I'm going to stop trying to be tall and start trying to be good." He took a breath. "And if you'll let me, I'm going to help with that scholarship, Mom's scholarship." He touched the letter with 2 fingers, reverent. "I want to read the applications. I want to choose kids who are like me when I'm good, not like me when I'm loud." I put my hand on the table near his, flat, grounded. "Done," I said. "You're trustee number 2. It means responsibility. It means you don't put your name on something you're not willing to carry." He nodded, serious as a man at a graveside and a christening at once. "I can carry," he said. "I will." We went to the porch and looked at the step together. In the thin winter light, the crack showed its ragged outline, the way a fault line shows where the earth means to move again. He crouched. He touched the wood. "It's not rotten," he said, almost surprised. "It's just tired." He looked up. "Like you sometimes." The honesty would have stung at noon. At 4, it felt like faith. "Then we'll sister it," I said. "We'll cut a new board and tie it to the old, and they'll hold each other." He grinned. "Like us," he said. "Like us," I answered. The wind came back with a little life in it and brought the smell of garlic and tomato from the direction Ethan's friends had taken. He straightened and shoved his hands into his jacket, not to hide, but because he was cold and not too proud to admit it. "Pizza?" he asked. "I'll go meet them. Then I'm coming back to make a list for the step. I think we need a pry bar and shims." He looked at me, checking. "Shims," I confirmed. "And a level. Don't ever guess at level. It'll betray you." He nodded, tucked the letter into his inside pocket like a passport, and started down the walk. Halfway, he turned back. "Hey," he called, voice easy, unforced. "When you sell something important, do you always feel this big and small at the same time?" I thought about it, then nodded. "When you sell it right," I said. "When you keep the part that matters." He touched his pocket. He touched his chest. He waved a hand at the empty driveway where the car had sat and at the house that still stood. "We kept it," he said, and it wasn't a question. Then he went, shoulders level, steps true. I stood there and let the cold go through me and out the other side. The house creaked the way old houses do to remind you they're on your side. Somewhere, the kettle clicked as it remembered how to be useful. I walked back in and closed the door softly so the latch whispered its little click, the way it had before and would again. I put the blue bowl back an inch to the left, because a life is made of inches. I opened the top drawer and saw the check and closed it and felt nothing but peace. I took out a pencil and wrote a list. Vocational school endowment paperwork. Porch step. Cut list. Call Mrs. Alvarez. Soup pot. At the top, I wrote my wife's name because it belongs at the top. Under it, I wrote, "Value doesn't vanish. It waits for eyes that can see." If you're still with me, if you've read this far with your own breath held now and then, and your own hands remembering some wheel, some tool, some letter, with your name in a script you loved. Tell me where you're reading from. Tell me if disrespect echoes on your street, and if quiet justice sounds the same when it arrives. If this story made you think of someone you owe a call, make it. If it made you look at a tired thing with new eyes, go wipe it down and make it ready. And if it gave you even a little of what it gave me, steadiness and the courage to be gentle, then like this, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment with your city and your story, and subscribe so you don't miss the next time we take something the world calls junk and show it for what it is. A promise kept.